This is WFYI News Now. It's March 3rd, and I'm Abriana Herron. On today's show, a reorganizational meeting for the Marion County Democrats. Indiana lawmakers consider a bill that would raise the minimum teacher salary. And lawmakers are debating big changes in education, from school funding to how race is discussed in the classroom.
Push to end DEI in not only state government but also classrooms, and kind of the chilling effect around that and what you can talk about in schools.
Those stories coming up, but first. The former leader of the Tindley Charter School network pleaded guilty to federal wire fraud charges. Former CEO Brian Metcalf submitted nearly $1 million worth of fake invoices to the school when he ran the network from 2019 to 2022. According to a plea agreement, some of that money went to pay his credit card bills, a casino that hosted his family reunion, and a company that fixed his roof. Metcalf will need to pay restitution, but it is unclear how much of that will go back to the school. The network runs 3 charter schools in Indianapolis, serving around 1,000 students. Indiana lawmakers are considering a bill that would raise the minimum teacher salary by $5,000 to a base of $45,000. As lawmakers debate the issue, WFYI's Eric Weddle explains how much Indiana public school teachers are earning.
The latest Indiana teacher compensation report shows the average salary for full-time educators is nearly $60,600, an increase of about $2,000 from the previous year. Nearly all school districts gave raises, though pay still varies. The highest reported teacher salary reached $110,000, while the lowest sits at $40,000. That's the state's minimum requirement. The report also shows that 88% of teachers stayed in the profession last year. The data, which excludes charter schools, comes as lawmakers consider boosting pay for early career teachers. I'm Eric Weddle.
To learn more about teacher pay, go to our website, WFYI.org. And for our final story today, more education news from the ongoing legislative session. Indiana lawmakers are considering bills that could change K-12 education in the state, from how schools are funded to what teachers can say about race in the classroom to how math is taught. WFYI editor Eric Weddle sat down with our State House education reporter Rachel Fredette to talk about those key bills and where they are in the legislative process.
So, Rachel, a main goal of this legislative session is to address local property taxes, and Governor Mike Braun and GOP leaders, they say homeowners are paying too much, but reducing the property taxes would impact schools as well. So what's going on?
Governor Braun has really led this push to cut property taxes for schools. Changes to the property tax formula could mean they have to adjust their budgets for less money, and a lot could come down on them at once.
And school choice is also getting a lot of attention, and it's kind of wrapped up in this because it's about how it is funded. And this is complicated. So could you explain the basics of a proposal to fund charter schools in a new way and how that would impact traditional school districts?
Yeah, so Senate Bill 518, which has kind of gone through a lot of phases, even though we're just halfway through the legislative session, it would require at least 100 students attending an eligible charter school to share their operations fund tax levy with charters starting in 2028. It would truly change how charter schools are funded since their inception in 2001, and it has already passed a major hurdle in the Senate. The bill's author, Senator Linda Rogers, said this bill was a sort of compromise with the widely discussed target of this legislation, IPS.
Right. So, yeah, a lot of this debate has centered around Indianapolis Public Schools District, which is the largest school district in the state and also the district that has the most charter schools in its boundary. So why has it become such a focus?
I think you just said it. IPS is the largest school district in the state, and it has a very complicated past with charter schools in its boundaries. But this year is definitely representative of that past because lawmakers have filed a number of bills that were effectively used to push this conversation of sharing money with charters. Now, as we head into the second half of the legislative session, we can see where this lands for IPS and other traditional school districts.
Right. And so there was another bill earlier in this session that got a lot of attention that would have dissolved IPS and a few other school districts across the state. What happened to that bill?
When a bill doesn't get a hearing, a committee hearing brought forth by lawmakers, it dies at a certain point. House Bill 1136 would have converted IPS schools to charter schools and other districts as well. I think there were like another 4 or so. And it's not moving forward. But there's still a slight chance that that language could still come back in an amendment of sorts. It's dead for now, I guess is the best way to put it.
Besides these bills, what other education legislation is going through the State House that you're following right now?
It's a budget year. So when it's a budget year, we get to have a big conversation about education funding, how much, schools are going to get over the biennium, and that makes it a bigger part of the conversation because the other priority bill being led by the Senate is on property tax reform, which could significantly impact school districts. Math is getting a lot of attention. I think it's kind of been mirrored with being a lot like reading was a couple of years ago, where they're going to want to put a lot of resources and interventions in for kids that are struggling with math. I think it's reflective of the national scores that we've had here in the state, and it's got a lot of bipartisan support.
Okay.
I think the last piece would be the push to end DEI in not only state government, but also classrooms, and kind of the chilling effect around that and what you can talk about in schools when you can't talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion.
And I'm sure as people hear you discuss this legislation, they're going to have strong feelings about these bills, whether they're in favor of it or against it. So how can they tell lawmakers what they think?
Anyone can give testimony during committee hearings on a bill, and you can sign up to do that. But if you can't, another way to have your voice heard is to email or call lawmakers to tell them what you think about a bill. So all of their information is public when it comes to their public office. So if you want to send them an email or if you want to call them and tell them what you think about a bill, that's something that's within your purview to get your voice heard.
Okay, great. Rachel, thank you very much.
Thank you, Eric.
And that's all for today's episode of WFYI News Now. Our podcast is produced by Drew Daudelin and Zach Bundy, with support from the news team at WFYI and public media journalists across the state. Our news director is Sarah Neal-Estes. Kendall Antron produced our music, and I'm your host, Abriana Herron. If you like today's episode, remember to subscribe and share, and follow WFYI on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and YouTube to check in on our newsroom throughout the day. Thanks for listening. We'll be back tomorrow.